recording. Yay. Um, Hannah, would you like to start off the conversation by fasting, pausing, or participating in the invitation? What practices are absolutely critical to implement on a new ways of working journey?
Thank you. I'm going to participate, but I'm going to try and keep it brief and to hear what everyone else thinks. Um, I feel like we've been on this journey for a couple of years where I work, and there are loads of really useful practices I could pick out. But I think
I'm listening to something else now.
the first thing that's so important is to find ways of helping the team to pause and reflect. In my organisation, we have a culture of working at an incredibly fast pace, lots of firefighting, very reactive, which can be really disempowering. And there still is this sense that pausing and reflecting is not doing work, and that you get feeling guilty. But of course, you don't make any progress if you can't reflect. So the retros, which I know are linked in the playbook, have been really useful for me and the team to just build that in to certain meetings and structure it in, because it takes so much time to actually have that shift and really think of those processes as work and kind of do them voluntarily. So for me, it's pause and reflection and having some structure to sort of give permission to the team to do that. That has been the best first step, really. And I'm going to pass over to John. That's right, isn't it? Remember my alphabet, or you participate? Yeah, no, that's still correct. Principal of university, John.
Thanks. Mark, can you remind me what a pause is? Is it to just all hang out in silence for a bit, or is it something else?
Yeah, just the time to think, and no one else will speak, so I shouldn't be speaking.
I'm going to participate after that brief pause. It's because you said pause, Hannah. And I was aware, first of all, that simply doing that 10 seconds there, I felt something, so it's funny that on that level, even there's discomfort. Maybe can I throw it back to you? Because I'd love to know a little bit more about that difficulty in, it sounds like you're saying your team is benefiting from the retros, but at the same time doesn't want them because it's not work. It's actively not working because we're just talking about stuff. So I'm curious. It sounds like there's a contrast between the fact it's beneficial, but it's also like something we're not always wanting to do. Can you say a bit more, Hannah?
Am I allowed to, Mark?
We'll have to wait until we go around the circle. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe in that case, let's just take what I said as a question to you later, maybe, but more as I'm fascinated at how we struggle to slow down to speed up later on. There's something at play there. And so I can pass on, right, Mark? I'll pass on to Perry.
We're going to go in alphabetical order.
Oh, right. Okay, I'll pass on to whoever's next on the alphabet.
That's me. Thank you, John. So, what practices are absolutely critical to a new ways of working journey? This practice is my favorite. The circle discussion. I came across it when I first experienced the transition from traditional ways of working to something a bit more progressive. That was in New Zealand when I worked for a law firm. There was also a community organization. Our purpose was to meet unmet legal need, and circles were introduced when we made the decision to experiment with this. And it was definitely the moment, or the moment I began to learn to listen. So for me, yeah, I think circle discussions kind of stand out as the practice that jumps to mind initially. I love them because I think before I came across them, I might have been somebody who was tempted to talk a lot in a meeting, and this structure prevents me or anybody else from doing that. And it teaches you to listen as well, and to listen when you're thinking about the if people are familiar with the different kind of levels of listening. You can't be listening to respond, because it might not be your turn to talk. So it teaches a different way of listening. So I'm going to pass to Nadia. Nadia, what do you think?
I would love to give +1 on listening. Actually, even if active listening is not new at all, we all do it not enough. So I give, following the example of John, I will give 10 seconds of just silence to this conversation. Thank you. And then adding one practice I totally love is so-called Swedish coffee. Is a practice where you meet in a team, but you don't have an agenda, you don't have a retrospective in mind. You just sit together, you drink a cup of coffee, you discuss family stuff or hobbies or weather or whatever. So you just connect, you just are human together. You drink a cup of coffee, you share stories, you laugh, and everyone who passes you and see you laughing. In Germany, we do have a sentence saying the one who is laughing at work has reserves, so can work more. It's not funny at all. And I hate this sentence, but I believe that if we are connecting more at work as human beings and less as functions, that we can create better results altogether. And with this practice I love to share, I will give to Perry.
Nadia, I will participate. I can remember going to the meaning conference in Brighton a few years ago, and I saw on the chalkboard, and then it was, I think, replicated in a badge, conversations are the smallest unit of change. And I absolutely loved it, because it spoke to me about the power in conversation. So often when we are invited to think about a topic, we want to have a conversation with somebody. We want to externalize it and make sense. And so what we see in the world of work is often that we encourage people to have those conversations, whether they be extremely challenging conversations on feedback or accusations of poor treatment, or conversations about performance, or conversations about career journeys. The world is littered with conversations. I'm thinking what's missing is a conversation about the rules at work, both written rules that are prescribed in policies and theories and legislation, but all those other rules where stuff never gets questioned or stuff doesn't get challenged or talked about, because it's almost like the cultural code. So I'd like to introduce a practice, and it links to Russell Ackoff's work on systems thinking and systems change, where he says if you change the rules, the system changes, and therefore things become different. So I'd like to introduce a conversation that we can instigate at any point, where we specifically talk about a rule that we believe we are either abiding by or is part of the makeup of something here. And we have the space and the comfort and the confidence to explore that, understand that, and perhaps really test whether it's a rule or whether it's some power dynamic or whether it actually is genuinely something we should live and operate by because it's in our interests. So I'd like to see that happen. More conversations where we can challenge the rules. And I will pass to Rodney.
Nice. These are great. There's so many places to go. But where I'm going to go is actually to add to what Hannah said rather than go into a different area, because Hannah, I could not agree with you more around reflection and retrospection. And, you know, we often joke that The only bad retro is the one that you don't do. Because it's something that I think is like so vital to doing transformation work, I've fiddled a lot with different ways of doing it and different cadences of doing it and different altitudes of doing it. So I just wanted to share like a couple of practices that my own team has sort of settled into that seem to be serving us really well around reflection, because most of us who have participated in group reflective practices know the challenges of like having a conversation about the content and about the system and about the human dynamics all in one place, sort of muddled together. And that's better than nothing, certainly. And one of the ways that I've started to like parse these things out is sort of thinking about reflection in 3 ways. So one is really micro reflection. My little project team has instituted something we flippantly call Ask Cats. It stands for any stops, starts, or continues after that session. And it is literally a Slack prompt that one of the 3 of us puts in after every interaction we have. That's a really quick, like, what'd you notice? What'd you think? So it's like the micro, it's very content oriented, it's very in the work. Weekly, we do something called a hot wash. This came actually from my time at McChrystal Group many years ago. And that is something that's just looking back on the week, pattern making, sense making, some about team, some about client to get us set up for the next week. And once a month, we do a 90-minute, like bigger retrospective. And that's like, what are we noticing? We map it to the OS Canvas, which is a tool that Ready uses. We look at what about it is related to our team and what about it is related to the client, what about it is related to other things. And it's like this bigger moment of making, noticing what's been and also making what's been implicit more explicit and really doing a lot more work with that data. And so I just wanted to throw that out as like something practical that after a lot of experimentation with different reflective practices, I've just found for now is like my working way of doing it. And I guess we're around the horn, right? So we get to go back to Hannah.
Thank you. I'm just going to pause a second. Okay. Loads of really interesting stuff there. I guess just to touch on the pausing and reflection again, just a moment. There's definitely a tension there, and sometimes a lack of will to engage. And quite often try to structure reflections around team goals or purposes. But I work with quite a large team of brilliant academics who spend most of their days giving feedback and helping students reflect. So of course they think they know everything, and they do know a lot, but find it quite hard to do themselves. So one thing that I found really useful when I can see that people are not engaging and they think, what's all this fluffy stuff that's Hannah's on about? We just need to get down to the real work. Is that I flip it to try and get them to reconnect with that purpose again, which gives us something to reflect on. So there's a really, I think I found it on the Liberating Structures website, a really nice activity, creative destruction activity called TRIZ, and I can't remember what it stands for, but I know it's Russian, where you kind of forget what the anti-purpose is. So what's the opposite of what we all want to achieve? And that suddenly really engages people because it can be really funny. It sort of helps people drop all their barriers and all the stuff that they're externalizing and come up with something really silly, anti-purpose. And then we start reflecting on, okay, so what things are we doing that are contributing to that thing we really don't want to achieve? And then you actually get to the heart of some of the real issues in a quite fun way. And I found it really useful, sort of, I guess it's a trick really, but to change the mood of a room when they're just not wanting to play. So yeah, TRIZ, I think that's what it's called, is a really useful starting point for that. And I will hand over to John.
Thanks, Hannah. I love that. I never heard the word anti-purpose before, but I love that. I love the idea of defining what we don't do in order to have a better conversation about what we do. That's amazing. I wanted to share, I'm trying to ask myself, what is the smallest intervention that leads to the most natural reorganizing? So there's a small thing that happens and all the chips seem to move around. And I might ramble here, because essentially for me, there's a principle at heart, which is the right, or basically making volunteering the key, let's say, element to this. So for me to be able to choose to do something or to choose to not do something, and I think there's nuance in that. There's negotiation with reality aside from colleagues required in order for this to work, because if no one volunteers, it's nobody's job and there's consequences to nobody doing anything. But trying to design a system around volunteering, I think, is a single principle that leads to many, many implications. And so practically, I've been trying a few things. One is to think only in projects, and then to ask ourselves, well, what needs doing and who wants to do it? And actually to cast the invitation out as wide as possible, because then I'm noticing person in team A, like I keep coming back to the idea that teams are often just fictions. We've got this idea that I'm in a team, which is largely, I think, like objectively untrue, although subjectively highly true a lot of the time. And I'm asking myself the thing I'm noticing is that by creating projects and then making all the roles up for grabs, it seems to create this natural kind of reorganization. I am noticing some downsides to my own practice, which is that in some instances, it is overly valuable to extroverts in a lot of cases, or no, maybe not extroversion, but assertiveness. So if I'm assertive, I'm going to put my hand up for roles. So there's some mediating, and I'm already discovering some ways in which I can do this and not have that problem. But I'm finding volunteering and then creating mechanisms that allow for volunteering to be increasingly valuable. I'll pause there because I think I've spoken enough, but it's something I'm deeply passionate about, because I've noticed it, namely with children, actually, that if you allow volunteering for long enough, they volunteer for all sorts of stuff you wouldn't class as homework, that typically has way more lessons involved than classical homework. And since we all grew up in those schools, I can't see that we're anything other than the programming of them. And I think volunteering is a great way to unlearn that programming in many instances. Yeah. Thanks. Over to you, Mark.
Nice. Yeah, I guess this conversation's why I love circles. And Perry, when you spoke of meaning there, it reminded me of I think the only time we've met, and I remember giving you a hug, which was really, really forward, considering we'd never met. And wow, can you imagine? Yeah, when we could hug. So I loved Ask Hats, Rodney, and yeah, I could see that could easily be added. And yeah, Triz, I wasn't an enormous fan of Triz at first for some reason, but yeah, Anna, I fully agree. It's an awesome tool that I enjoy using now. And what else? So I guess we've spoken a bit about a few different meeting structures, and when I think about new ways of working, or whatever we choose to call it, I often kind of think of meetings and decision making as the gateway drugs to this stuff. And if you kind of shift the way you meet and shift the way you decide, then those are two really awesome starts. So I'm going to start with yeah, I'm going to say I'm really torn between the advice process and consent decision making, and which will I choose? I'm gonna suggest the advice process is yeah, something that can be critical to a new ways of working journey. So that's when the leader of a team, and I remember experiencing this, and it was mind blowing when it happened. So the leader, this is back in New Zealand, the leader of the organization said, "Hey, I'm no longer making all the decisions. I'm fed up of making all the decisions, and also you know better than I do because you're closer to the information. So here, have the power and handed it over to us." And it was a little unnerving, I guess, at first for some of us that weren't used to having having the power to make decisions, such as who we hire. And it led to the most prolonged period of engagement in my career by far. I'd kind of been fulfilled fleetingly previously. I'd enjoy my job for a while, then I'd not enjoy my job, and then with this kind of ability to make some decisions and to use this process. So the way that it works is, I'm sure many of us are familiar, but just very quickly, pretty much anyone can make any decision. Sometimes there's a line or some areas where it's not the case that you can make a decision in that area. But yeah, by and large, anyone can make more or less any decision in an organization, provided they speak to those who will be affected and seek advice from those with expertise on the issue. So super simple. And yeah, I think I credit circles with teaching me to listen, and I kind of credit the advice process as the thing that helped keep me engaged for years rather than months in work. Yeah, so that's the next one I'm going to chuck in, and I will pass to Nadia.
Thank you. And I need really a deep breathe in and out, because it's so much in just some minutes. So I'm, this joke, are we mindful or is our mind full? And that's why I totally would love to add to this list of things which are important to the future of work: the full body we bring into the work, and also some things which are connected to our brain. And because we have over 70 people in the call, I would like to invite everyone to a short exercise just to show how it works. So everyone, just stroke your cheeks like this. So from above down for some seconds, and feel what it does. Really feel it. And then try to say, my life is great. Just try it. And no smile mark. No. Yeah. And you see, probably it is not working because you don't believe yourself. Because if we do this, our brain, which is connected to the muscles in the face, knows that something is not going well. So if you try to say, my life is great, and this typical question at work, how is going, and everyone is automatically answering wonderful or good, it's not what we want. We want to be fully at work. And if life is not going well, we should answer life is not going well. So let's do the opposite. So we're now going up with the hands, and again, feel it. Feel what you do to your cheeks, to your face. Feel how it's different to really go up here. And you can do it on daily basis. This really sends signals to your brain, which says something must be good, because Nadia is somehow kind of smiling. And if I now try to say my day is really bad, it's not working again, because my face is smiling, saying, no, Nadia, your day is great. So I don't know if it is a practice already, but I would like to invite us to be at work with a full person we are, not just the brain which is thinking and logically following steps and processes. And with this, I'm totally happy to give the word to Perry.
Thank you. That was very stimulating, Nadia. Thank you. I reconnected, I felt, with my physical self there because I was drifting in thought. I came across a practice at a hackathon with a group of Slovenian engineers, software, HR people, just a complete random collection. And a small group came up with a phenomenal practice that I just thought I'd love to see happen. And the practice was that you could come up with any side hustle, improvement, volunteering option, whatever you wanted to come up with, and you raised it as a ticket, a little bit like we've heard in the past, HCL Technologies, you can raise a ticket against your manager. So you can raise a ticket that I have an innovation, I have an idea, I have a suggestion, and you raise it to the responsible person who has 24 hours to come back to you to either support, endorse, or embargo that. And if they don't within 24 hours, you got permission to go for it. And I just thought, what a wonderful way to expedite innovation and create something where people can honestly see their chance to influence. It could go anywhere. It could go all over the place. But I just love the thought that you have a 24-hour window where for a moment, you've got the chance to do something that you think is really important to make a change around you and in the world of work that you operate in. And nobody can embargo you if they go beyond that 24 hours, you just go for it. So yeah, an interesting, almost anarchic proposition there. And I will pass on to Rodney, thank you.
Okay. First, I just want to say, Nadia, that was really fun. And also makes me think, this is not going to be my practice, but I'm just saying this out loud. It just makes me think about how still we all keep ourselves on video. And like, even just doing that simple exercise, it's like, I don't know why we don't feel at liberty to like stretch and just act like human beings. Like no one in regular life just sits perfectly still and stares into a screen. And yet that's my experience of a lot of Zoom meetings. So I felt like that was a very helpful reminder that you can like behave like a human. So thank you for that. I want to throw out something that is not yet in the playbook that Mark has curated. It's there's a little header that says hiring and there's nothing underneath it yet. And some of you know that this is something that I've been working on at the Ready and experimenting with, and I by no means have the answers, so can't give you those. But the reason that this is so important to me and I want to share this sort of practice is because it's very related to equity and inclusion work. And a lot of people in our space, for a variety of reasons, haven't always historically had access to doing the disruptive kind of work that we do. Like in many ways, our ability to do this work comes from incredible privilege of education, of network, of circumstance, of being allowed into places to teach and coach and disrupt. And I say that as preamble because the practice that I would encourage any of you to try as you're bringing new humans into the fold is to really get curious and think critically about the specific skills that you're looking for rather than experience, resume, schooling, brand names, etc. And even as you get into those skills, like excavating and parsing and being real about the bias within them. So when we talk about hiring for self-management, for example, it has taken, and we're only coming to this now, and we are, 18 months or 2 years into this journey, and we are only coming now into a real understanding of what the specific skills are that are required to really flourish in self-management. And any of these can be learned and taught. So this isn't a prereq, but we're starting to parse ideas around ask, the ability to ask for what you need, ideas around personal responsibility and ownership, the ability to hold expertise lightly, the ability to take feedback in with curiosity and not defensiveness. Like this level of specificity under a skill like self-managing or something is really important if we want to be able to hire people who don't look like us and who don't have exactly the same experience. And I think too often we sort of bucket a bunch of stuff together and we call people like self-starters or like, innovators or disruptors or whatever. And like what that translates to is like culture fit and who we like and who makes us feel comfortable. And that's not it. That's not what we're trying to do. And so the practice that I'm trying to like live into, and frankly find very challenging, is getting really clear and specific about what we mean when we talk about a skill, and then filtering for that, not for all of these other things that promote sameness. And with that, I will pass back to Hannah.
Thank you. That's so interesting. And I'm really keen to hear more about that. I'm going to cycle back though to the advice process and volunteering slightly, and just give an example of how I think the advice process, a slightly modified, structured version of it, helped us as a group of universities rewrite our entire degree programs over the course of 3 months. So I'll try not to talk too long on this, but I just think it's a really powerful example and something that I'm really proud of. A couple of years ago, we had 8 music colleges that all delivered similar but different courses, and had all been running for a number of different years with different levels of kind of institutionalized practices and behaviors, and everyone thought they ran the best course. And we had a challenge that we needed to rewrite new contemporary courses, and every college had to work to the same set of courses, right? So we knew that for that to be successful and for the students to have a good experience, that the people running and teaching those courses locally needed to believe in them and not think, oh, I wish we were doing our old course, it was so much better when we had control. So ownership was so important. And we also wanted to make the most of the expertise across all of these colleges, because how brilliant all our teachers are industry practitioners, so just such a wealth of knowledge there. So we had to figure out how in 3 months to rewrite, I think we wrote 190 modules using that community and coming up with something that everyone was happy with. So we decided to use volunteering to get some module authors, and that actually managed to work out quite well, and I don't know how, so don't ask me, but it worked. So you had 190 or so different module authors, and then we used a sort of a version of the advice process to create a timeline and create a way for everybody to feed into what those modules should look like, the design of those. So the module author would write something initially, because it's much easier to give feedback on something that exists rather than a blank page. And then they would send that out to the experts and the stakeholders for a round of feedback, and make some revisions, and then go through that process again until we hit sort of a hard stop, recognizing that there's absolutely no way that we could do everything that everyone wanted. But if the process was transparent and everyone had opportunities to feedback and felt listened to and heard, and also accept that this is not the final product, this is our first iteration, our experiment moving forward, that we'd be in a place where people would be happy to try it and feel like it belonged to them. And we did it, and it's certainly not perfect, but this is our first year running 6 new courses, and it's completely transformed the way that we work as an organisation. So yeah, I really, really recommend the advice process, and it's something that I want to embed more in sort of day-to-day practice rather than kind of a structure. So yeah, I'm going to pass to John.
Thanks. Sounds there like there's also this element of volunteering in that instance, leading to people taking on something as their own, or something like that, like high intrinsic motivation. And I saw a comment in the chat that said, well, when there's volunteering, don't few, is it like 20% of people that end up volunteering? I actually, despite the fact I'm championing this, and I think you're saying in your example, Hannah, that it was really valuable. I also do agree with that often I'm seeing a few people turn up. Although it doesn't, I don't see that as a reason to not do it. I see it as a reason to do it for longer or more. But I think there's things that help and don't help. And I'm going to go through a version of the advice process I'm playing with at the moment that might link, which is that essentially I've seen that when I use volunteering, 20% do turn up. I have noticed that sometimes I've come back a year later and those projects are still going, which tells me something about how powerful it is to volunteer, because just of their own intrinsic motivation, these new projects have popped up and stayed for a year. But then I'm thinking, well, so I do think that 20% increases over time, but it doesn't increase to 100 as far as I can see. And so I ask myself, well, why is that? And I'm adamant it's because not everyone, I think there's a personality type. Not everyone has the kind of personality to put their hand up straight away. And then sometimes I start asking myself, well, I think it is desirable for people to assert their own motivations, or to find out the motivations. I don't always know what motivates me until I've done some work to figure that out. And so I start to think, well, the fact that 80% haven't showed up tells me, let's work with that. That sounds like there's a huge opportunity for growth. And I think someone mentioned listening earlier. I think it's like one of the foundations here. I think it was you, Nadia. Listening plus some form of coaching that leads to metacognition or something like that will help a group of people or an individual to ask themselves to work, basically, to ask themselves, what is it about how I'm thinking about this situation that's influencing the outcome? So we tend to think of the problem, but then to go, there's a problem, there's me relating to the problem, and I'm thinking about the world in a certain way that's having an effect on this. And so the practice tangibly I've been playing with is kind of, instead of the advice process, there's no advice, it's just questions. So I don't know, Hannah, you've got a problem that you bring, and maybe kind of according to the advice process, you'd make a proposal. And then any of us in the group can ask you questions either about the problem or about how you're thinking about the problem. So essentially you're getting a round of coaching in order to talk about the problem, and because I see the person as prior to their own problem. And I think creating cultures that have, I think listening is like the foundation to even being able to do that in the first place, and questioning as a method to orient the speaker towards their problem can lead to cultures where like growth isn't just seen as like something that you do as a part of your yearly review or whatever, but it's like, I'm being paid to grow here. And then I see like, a kind of upgrading of, the word I keep hearing at the moment is sense making, but basically our ability to make sense of complex problems. And that I'm kind of putting these two things together, volunteering plus that coaching as a culture, not just as like, I've got a guy who coaches me, but really seeing it as colleagues, we're here to help each other grow, I think is a way to account for that 20-80 split that maybe is a problem in some instances. So the tangible practice there is like coaching built into meeting processes even is something I'm curious about. And Mark, I'll go over to you.
Thank you. I'm aware of the clock and there's only a few minutes left, so I'm gonna selfishly pass because I want to hear from you guys, because this has just been so helpful. My mind's whirring with ideas for how to kind of iterate the first draft of the playbook. So Nadia, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. I would like to add a category to your playbook, because the one I'm missing is leadership. And as John already started this topic on how to help the employees or the people to cope with the problem instead of guiding them to the solution. One practice I totally love is called feed forward, which is the opposite to feedback. So feedback is saying some nice words to the work has been done, and feed forward means that you feed the future in your relationship. So for example, I could say, Mark, the way you facilitate our round is so helpful. I wish you are always with me when I do such kind of conversations in the future. So I connect to your strengths, I connect to the future, and I help you to see what is helpful in our working relation. And I totally love to use it also with people I don't really know well, because what I see in others is somehow always true. And with this, I would like to give the word to Perry.
Thank you, Nadia. As you were talking, my mind was going to conversations I've been having with clients in fairly traditional, hierarchical, but there's an intent to want to be more humanist and human-centered. And so I'm in the privileged position of helping them work out what that looks like and what that means. And so a lot of what you've talked about with some of the processes and the shifts that are needed are coming through. I'm probably not pushing them assertively enough, but what I am pushing very strongly is that they envisage their organization, or they envision their organization no longer as a stacked hierarchy, but as interlocking, connected, nested circles in every single dimension. I almost refuse to draw square boxes and lines around any representation of what that organization's flow and just general perception needs to look like. And what I've found is it does start to create a different pattern in the minds of the people who are then looking at their organization. So I wonder whether there's another addition to the playbook, which is not necessarily to just jump on the holacracy circles kind of mentality, but just how do we represent what this organization looks like schematically in order for people to understand where they are, where things flow, and so on. So it's more an invitation than anything, but I found it incredibly, quite literally liberating and decoupling for people to see their organization represented in a very, very different, slightly more natural way. And with that, I will pass to Rodney. Thank you.
All right, with 1 minute until we break. So just because there have been a few questions in the chat publicly and then a few DMs privately about hiring, I will contribute something to the playbook that will try to answer them. But what they spark for me is more of actually a meta comment that I think relates to a lot of what we've talked about today. We say a lot at the Ready internally and to our clients, like, start the way you mean to go and start the way you mean to finish. And what I find happens sometimes, and this is true of hiring in a lot of places, and it's true of compensation in a lot of places and budgeting in a lot of places, is we have this more generative, more adaptive mindset around structure, around meetings, around decision making. And then we get into these more traditional and process oriented areas, and we like forget about all those principles, and we go back to building from the complicated processes that haven't been serving us. And so one of the things in hiring, for example, but also in terms of compensation at the Ready, and in terms of finance, actually, that we've really tried to keep in mind is how, well, I'll use hiring as an example. How can we create a hiring experience that feels integrated with the experience of working at the Ready? So the fact is, working in self-management, as most of us know, and doing the kind of work that many of the people on this call are doing, either internally or externally, is incredibly challenging. It's egoically challenging. It is emotionally challenging. Like, there's a lot in trying to move centuries of history and patriarchy through the work that we do. Like, there's a lot in that. And so I say this to say, one of the things, for example, that has come up recently in terms of our hiring process is like, it should feel challenging in the way that this work feels challenging. And it also should feel collaborative and supportive in the way that working at the Ready does. And it's like, whatever all of us are doing in our systems or in client systems, let's try to really ground into what is true and do it that way, do it in the principled way, and not forget what it is that we're trying to actually create. Because I think it often, I find personally, when I'm presented with a new problem to solve, I'll suddenly revert to old ways of thinking and old ways of working and old, more traditional mindsets. And that's not the move. The move is actually to like reconnect to what I know works and what I know is more progressive and more adaptive, and carry that with me. So so I would throw out, it's not exactly a practice, but it's a good prompt, and it's sort of a good habit review to be like, are we starting the way we want to? Are we iterating the way we mean to? Are we connecting back to what this is meant to be and do?
Thank you, Rodney and John, Nadia, Hannah, and Perry. That was so helpful, and I'm really, really grateful that you've given an hour to support the design of this playbook. So that was awesome. Yeah, thank you. And we've got about 25 minutes of our time together left, and it's now time for the audience to move into circles of their own so that they can practice this practice and discuss the inspiration that you've just shared, and have a think about what they might go away and try tomorrow in their own contexts. So before we do that, audience, please unmute yourself and say a thank you, a chaotic thank you to these generous 5 people for being awesome today.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing insights. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, folks.
Thanks, Emil.
And yeah, feel free to turn all of your cameras on as well. Okay, how about we stretch for a couple of minutes? Yeah, my chair's not very comfortable, and I want to stand up. So let's just take 2 minutes, and in 2 minutes' time, I'll begin to open up the breakout rooms, and we can move into those circles. And those that were just speaking, then, if you need to duck off to other work or to yeah, whatever it is you need to do, then thank you, and speak to you soon. Okay, it's 4 minutes past, so 2 minutes in 2 minutes time, so at 8:06, I'll begin to open some breakout rooms.